The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast cathedral made of silver and light. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in curved rows that spiraled upward toward the crystal dome ceiling. Each species had their own section, their own breathing apparatus, their own protective barriers. The air itself was a carefully balanced mixture that could sustain most known life forms. Though it smelled strange to human senses, Captain Jake Morrison stood near the back wall, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the proceedings. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his mind was racing. 3 months ago, Earth had been just another backwater planet on the edge of known space. Now they were here, in the heart of galactic civilization, facing a decision that would determine the fate of every human alive. The creature at the center of the hall was impossible to ignore. Ambassador Zektar of the Hegemony Empire stood nearly 9 feet tall, his reptilian body covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. Right now, those scales were a deep crimson, signaling anger and dominance. His forked tongue flicked out between rows of razor-sharp teeth as he addressed the assembled delegates. "The terms are simple," Zektar hissed, his voice carrying through. The translation devices worn by every representative. "This upstart species from the Deathworld called Earth will face our champion in ritual combat. If they win, they may continue their pitiful existence as a free people. If they lose, they will serve the hegemony as is proper for all inferior races." A murmur rippled through the hall. The blue-skinned Valdari in the front row whispered among themselves. The crystalline Zephyrians clinked softly like wind chimes. Even the massive Burathans, who rarely showed any emotion, shifted uncomfortably in their reinforced seats. Dr. Lisa Carter, Earth's chief xenobiologist, stood beside Morrison. Her clipboard was filled with notes about every species in the room, but right now, her attention was focused on the holographic display that had appeared above the hall center. The image showed a creature that looked like it had crawled out of humanity's worst nightmares. "That's Vexthal," she whispered to Morrison. "The hegemony's champion. 8 feet tall, armored hide 3 inches thick, claws that can slice through steel plating. It's never been defeated." The hologram rotated slowly, showing the creature from every angle. Its body was built like a tank, with massive shoulders, and arms that ended in claws longer than human fingers. Its head was elongated, with small red eyes that seemed to burn with perpetual fury. Scars covered its hide, evidence of countless battles. "How many opponents has it faced?" asked Lieutenant Danny Price, the youngest member of Earth's delegation. His voice was barely above a whisper, but Morrison heard the fear in it. 47, Dr. Carter replied, consulting her notes. "Representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Some were twice its size. Others were faster or had natural weapons or could breathe poison. None of it mattered." The hologram changed, showing footage from previous battles. Morrison watched as Vexthal tore through opponent after opponent with mechanical efficiency. A warrior from the insectoid Klaxi race lasted 12 seconds. A champion from the war-loving Thurian Empire managed almost 2 minutes before falling to those terrible claws. "The pattern is always the same," Dr. Carter continued. "Vexthal studies its opponent for a few moments, then attacks with overwhelming force. It never plays with its prey. It never shows mercy. It simply kills and moves on." Ambassador Zektar's voice boomed through the hall again. "Each species has sent their finest warrior to face our champion. The proud Valdari sent their greatest duelist. The savage Thurians sent their most feared berserker. The ancient Zephyrians sent their most skilled battle sage. All fell before the might of the hegemony." The reptilian ambassador's gaze swept across the hall until it settled on the human delegation. "Now we come to the newest addition to our galactic community. The humans of Earth crawling up from their death world to join civilized society. Tell us, Captain Morrison, which of your apex predators will you send to die for your people's freedom?" Morrison stepped forward, his boots echoing on the polished floor. Every eye in the hall turned to him, and he felt the weight of billions of lives resting on his shoulders. Back on Earth, people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their fate was being decided in a hall of aliens light years away. The hegemony assumes we will send a warrior, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices. They expect us to follow the pattern established by every other species. Send our strongest fighter to face their champion in single combat? That is the tradition, Zektar replied, his scales shifting to a deeper shade of red. Each species sends their finest example of physical prowess to represent their people. Surely, even humans understand the concept of honor. Morrison nodded slowly. We understand honor very well, Ambassador. We also understand that honor means different things to different people. Speak plainly, human. Who will you send to face Vexthal? The captain looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. Some looked curious, others showed pity, and a few seemed almost bored. They all expected the same outcome. Earth's champion would face the hegemonies. Monster lose quickly, and humanity would join the long list of species serving the Empire. We will send someone, Morrison said finally, but not who you expect. Explain yourself, Zektar hissed. Every species here has sent their version of the perfect warrior, the strongest, the fastest, the most skilled in combat. They all approached this challenge the same way, and they all failed the same way. Because they were weak, the ambassador replied. Because they lacked the strength to stand against true power, Morrison shook his head. No, ambassador. They failed because they were thinking like predators. They were thinking like hunters. But humanity learned long ago that the most dangerous predator isn't always the biggest or strongest. Then what is it? Asked Counselor Thren, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. The smartest, Morrison replied. The one that can adapt. The one that can look at a problem from a different angle and find a solution that nobody else considered. The hall fell silent. Even the constant background hum of the life support system seemed to fade. Representatives leaned forward in their seats, straining to hear what the human would say next. We will send our champion to face Vexthal, Morrison continued. But we won't send a warrior, we won't send a soldier. We'll send someone who understands that there's more than one way to win a fight. Ambassador Zektar's scales had turned almost black with rage. You mock this sacred tradition? You insult the memory of every champion who died in that arena. We honor them, Morrison said quietly, by refusing to repeat their mistakes. The captain turned to face the assembled delegates. In 3 days, Earth's representative will face the hegemony's champion in the arena on Nexus Prime. We ask only that you judge us fairly when that time comes. With that, Morrison turned and walked toward the exit, his small delegation following behind. The hall erupted in discussion as soon as the humans left, voices mixing in dozens of languages as representatives tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Back in their quarters, Dr. Carter grabbed Morrison's arm. Jake, what are you thinking? We don't have anyone who can face that thing. Our strongest soldiers couldn't last 10 seconds against Vexthal. Morrison looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Earth hung in the darkness, waiting for news of their fate. We don't need strength, Lisa. We need something else entirely. What? Faith? Morrison said simply. Faith that being human means something more than just surviving. Faith that we can find a way to win without becoming monsters ourselves. And if you're wrong? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, then we'll face whatever comes next together. Just like we always have. The next 3 days would determine the fate of humanity. But for now, they could only wait and hope that being human would be enough. The arena on Nexus Prime was a marvel of engineering that could house 50,000 spectators from across the galaxy. The curved walls rose high into the artificial sky, lined with viewing platforms designed for different atmospheric requirements. Energy shields separated sections where methane-breathing creatures sat next to species that required high radiation levels. The arena floor itself was a perfect circle of reinforced metal, scarred from countless battles, but still gleaming under. The powerful lights, every seat was filled. Representatives from the Galactic Council occupied the premium viewing boxes, while citizens from hundreds of worlds packed the general sections. The air buzzed with excitement and the constant hum of translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different languages into comprehensible speech. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the human preparation area, a small chamber carved into the arena's outer wall. The room was sparse, containing only basic furniture and a medical station. Through the narrow window he could see the crowds gathering, their alien forms creating a tapestry of colors and shapes that would have been impossible to imagine just months ago. Dr. Lisa Carter paced back and forth, her tablet clutched in her hands. She had been running calculations for the past hour, trying to find some advantage they could exploit. The numbers were not encouraging. Jake, I've analyzed every recording we have of Vextal S fights. The creature's hide can withstand plasma weapons. Its claws can cut through starship hull plating. Its reaction time is faster than any human athlete. Lieutenant Danny Price sat in the corner, his face pale. He had been studying the arena's layout, memorizing every entrance and exit. The medical team is standing by, but they're not optimistic. No opponent has ever survived more than 5 minutes against that thing. Morrison nodded but said nothing. His attention was focused on the figure sitting calmly in the center of the room. Amy Rodriguez looked nothing like what the galaxy expected from Earth's champion. She was 53 years old, with graying brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her hands were steady as she checked the contents of her field pack for the third time. She wore standard Earth military fatigues, faded from years of use, and boots that had walked through more disasters than most people could imagine. "Amy," Morrison said quietly, "are you ready for this?" She looked up and smiled. It was the same smile she had used to comfort her children after nightmares, the same one she had shown to countless injured people during her years as a combat medic. "I've been ready for this my whole life, Jake. I just didn't know it until..." Now, the arena's announcement system crackled to life. A voice speaking in the common galactic tongue echoed through the massive space. "Citizens of the galaxy, welcome to this historic combat. Today we witness the Hegemony Empire's champion face the representative of the newest species to join our community." The crowd's roar was deafening. Thousands of beings cheered, whistled, clicked, and made sounds that had no human equivalent. In the viewing boxes, Morrison could see the other Earth delegates. They looked nervous, which was understandable. The fate of their entire species rested on what happened in the next few hours. First, entering from the Eastern Gate, the undefeated champion of the Hegemony Empire. 47 victories, 0 defeats. The terror of the arena, the breaker of worlds, Vextal the Destroyer. The Eastern Gate ground open with a sound like grinding stone. From the darkness beyond came a roar that shook the arena's foundations. Vextal emerged slowly, letting the crowd see every detail of its massive form. The creature stood 8 feet tall and weighed nearly half a ton. Its hide was black as space, covered in scales that had turned aside every weapon brought against it. Scars crisscrossed its body like a map of past victories. The monster's head was elongated, with small red eyes that burned with intelligence and fury. Its arms were longer than a human's entire body, ending in claws that gleamed like polished steel. Each finger ended in a talon that could punch through armor plating. Its legs were built for power, capable of launching its massive bulk across the arena in seconds. Vextal raised its arms and roared again. The sound was primal, terrifying, designed to freeze prey in place while death approached. The crowd loved it, cheering even louder as the creature stalked around the arena's perimeter. It moved like a predator, every step calculated, every movement flowing with deadly grace. Now, entering from the Western Gate, representing the people of Earth, the human challenger. The Western Gate opened silently. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd grew quiet, straining to see what emerged from the shadows. Then Amy Rodriguez stepped into the light, and the arena fell completely silent. She walked steadily across the metal floor, her boots making soft sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. She carried no weapons, wore no armor, showed no fear. To the assembled aliens, she looked like someone's grandmother, who had gotten lost on the way to a family gathering. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before the crowd began to react. First came confused murmurs, then outright laughter. In the viewing boxes, representatives from dozens of species stared in disbelief. Some covered their eyes, unable to watch what they assumed would be a massacre. Ambassador Zektar's scales had turned purple with rage. He stood in the hegemony's viewing box, his claws scratching gouges in the metal railing. "This is an insult. Where is their warrior? Where is their champion?" Captain Morrison's voice carried clearly through the arena's sound system. "Earth sends Amy Rodriguez, combat medic, 5th 10th Mountain Division, retired. Mother of 2, grandmother of 4, volunteer firefighter, and the bravest person I've ever known." The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Oohs echoed from every section. Alien voices shouted protests in hundreds of languages. Some spectators began leaving their seats, convinced they were witnessing some kind of elaborate joke, but Amy Rodriguez continued walking toward the center of the arena, her pace never changing. She stopped 20 feet from Vexthal and looked up at the massive creature. For the first time, the monster seemed uncertain. In all its previous battles, opponents had approached with weapons drawn, battle cries echoing, ready to fight and die with honor. This small human just stood there, looking at it with curious brown eyes. "I know what you're thinking," Amy said, her voice somehow carrying to every corner of the arena. "You're wondering if this is some kind of trick. You're wondering where the real fighter is." Vexthal's head tilted slightly, studying this strange opponent. "The truth is, I am the real fighter," Amy continued. "I've been fighting my whole life. Not against other warriors, but against things that matter. Against death, against despair, against the idea that some problems can't be solved." The creature's claws flexed, but it didn't attack. Something in the human's voice held it back. "I've pulled children from burning buildings. I've performed surgery in collapsed caves. I've climbed mountains in blizzards to rescue people who made stupid mistakes. I've faced down drunk drivers and drug dealers and men who thought they could hurt my family." Amy took off her field pack and set it on the ground. "I've never killed anyone, and I don't plan to start today. But I've saved more lives than I can count, and I won't let you hurt my people." The arena was dead silent now. Even the life support system seemed to have stopped humming. Every eye was focused on the small human woman facing the galaxy's most feared warrior. "So here's what's going to happen," Amy said, her voice steady and calm. "You're going to try to kill me. I'm going to try to stop you. And we're going to find out which one of us is really the predator." Vexthal's roar shook the entire arena. The sound was pure rage, pure hunger, pure desire to destroy. The creature's massive form coiled like a spring, preparing to launch itself across the space between them. Amy Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, watching the monster with the same calm attention she had once used to study. Avalanche conditions in the mountains. She had faced forces of nature before. This was just another storm to weather. The battle was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The battle began at the exact moment the arena's ceremonial bell rang out across Nexus Prime. Vexthal exploded into motion like a force of nature unleashed, its massive form covering the 20 feet between itself and Amy Rodriguez in less than 2 seconds. The creature's claws were extended, aiming for a killing blow that would end the fight before it truly began. But Amy Rodriguez was no longer where she had been standing. The human woman had moved at the last possible moment, not backward, as every other opponent had done, but forward and to the side. She slipped past Vexthal's charge like water flowing around a rock, her movements so smooth they seemed almost casual. The creature's claws whistled through empty air where her head had been a heartbeat before. The crowd gasped as one. In the viewing boxes, representatives from dozens of worlds leaned forward in their seats. This was not how these battles usually began. Previous opponents had met Vexthal's charge head-on, trying to match strength with strength. They had all failed within seconds. Vexthal's momentum carried it past Amy's position, and the creature slammed into the arena wall with a sound like thunder. The reinforced metal buckled under the impact, leaving a dent the size of a small vehicle. But the monster recovered quickly. Spinning around to face its opponent with red eyes blazing with fury, Amy stood 15 feet away, her hands still empty, her breathing still calm. She watched Vexthul with the same focused attention she had once used to study unstable cliff faces during mountain rescues. Every detail mattered when lives hung in the balance. "How did she do that?" whispered Dr. Lisa Carter from the human observation area. Her tablet showed readouts from the arena sensors, but the numbers seemed impossible. Her reaction time, her movement speed, they're not superhuman. She's just a normal person. Captain Jake Morrison kept his eyes fixed on the battle below. "She's not superhuman, Lisa. She's just experienced. 25 years of emergency response work teaches you to read situations, to anticipate what's coming next." Vexthul charged again, this time with more caution. The creature had learned from its first failed attack. It approached at an angle, claws spread wide to prevent another easy dodge. Its movements were calculated, precise, designed to corner prey and eliminate escape routes. Amy watched the monster approach and took 3 steps backward. To the crowd, it looked like she was retreating. But those 3 steps placed her exactly where she needed to be. When Vexthul committed to its attack, she was already moving again. This time, dropping into a crouch and rolling beneath the creature's outstretched arms, the maneuver brought her inside Vexthul's reach, where the creature's size became a disadvantage. Amy's hand shot out, striking a pressure point just below the monster's left arm. The blow wouldn't have hurt a human, but Vexthul's anatomy was different. The creature's left arm went numb for several seconds, its claws scraping uselessly against the arena floor. Amy was already moving again, flowing out of the creature's reach before it could recover. She had studied every recording of Vexthul's previous battles, memorizing the monster's anatomy, learning its strengths and weaknesses. Knowledge was just another tool. Like the medical supplies in her field pack, the crowd was beginning to understand that something unprecedented was happening. The small human woman wasn't just surviving against the galaxy's most feared warrior. She was controlling the fight, dictating the terms of engagement, making the massive predator dance to her rhythm. Vexthul's roar echoed through the arena, but now it carried a note of frustration. The creature had never faced an opponent like this one. Previous challengers had been warriors, thinking like warriors, fighting like warriors. They had met force with force, speed with speed, aggression with aggression. Amy Rodriguez was fighting like a medic. She treated the battle like a medical emergency, staying calm under pressure, assessing the situation, making decisions based on experience rather than emotion. Every movement was efficient, purposeful, designed to achieve a specific goal. She wasn't trying to overpower Vexthul. She was trying to solve the problem that Vexthul represented. The creature attacked again, this time with a sweeping motion of its massive tail. The appendage was as thick as a tree trunk and moved with crushing force. Amy saw it coming and jumped, not up but forward, using the creature's own tail as a stepping stone to launch herself toward its back. For a moment, she was airborne, her body silhouetted against the arena's lights. Then she landed on Vexthul's shoulders, her hands finding nerve clusters that most species didn't even know existed. The creature's roar became a shriek of pain and surprise. Amy held on for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to disrupt the monster's balance and coordination. Then she dropped back to the arena floor and rolled away as Vexthul thrashed wildly, trying to shake off an opponent that was no longer there. "She's studying it," Morrison said quietly. "Every attack, every reaction, every movement. She's learning how it thinks, how it fights, how it responds to different situations." Lieutenant Danny Price stared at the battle in amazement. "But why? What's the point of learning about something you can't hurt? Who says she can't hurt it?" Morrison replied, "She's just choosing not to, yet." The pattern continued for the next hour. Vexthul would attack with overwhelming force, and Amy would find a way to turn that force against the creature. When the monster tried to corner her, she would use its own momentum to escape. When it attempted to grab her, she would slip away like smoke. When it roared in frustration, she would strike at pressure points that left entire sections of its body temporarily paralyzed. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the battle evolved. What had begun as an expected massacre was becoming something else entirely. The human was teaching the galaxy's most feared warrior a lesson in humility. One careful movement at a time, Ambassador Zektar's scales had turned almost black with rage. This is impossible. She's not even fighting. She's just running away. But the other representatives were beginning to see the truth. Amy Rodriguez wasn't running away. She was leading. Every movement, every dodge, every counterattack was part of a larger strategy. She was wearing down the massive predator, both physically and psychologically. Vexthal was bleeding now from a dozen small wounds. None of them fatal, but all perfectly placed. The creature's breathing was becoming labored, its movements less coordinated. The monster that had never shown weakness in 47 previous battles was beginning to stumble. Amy, meanwhile, looked like she had barely warmed up. Her breathing was steady, her movements still precise, her eyes still focused with the same calm attention she had shown at the beginning. She had faced avalanches that lasted longer than this battle. "The creature is learning," Dr. Carter observed. "It's adapting its tactics, trying new approaches." "But so is she," Morrison nodded. "The difference is that she's been adapting to dangerous situations her entire life. That thing down there has always relied on brute force. It doesn't know how to think its way out of a problem." The battle was reaching its climax, though neither fighter seemed ready to deliver a finishing blow. Amy continued to dance around. Vextal's attacks, always one step ahead, always thinking 3 moves in advance. The creature's frustration was growing with each failed assault. Then something changed. Vextal stopped attacking and stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, its red eyes fixed on Amy with an intelligence that had been hidden beneath layers of rage and instinct. The creature was finally thinking instead of just reacting. Amy saw the change immediately. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when the real battle would begin. Everything up until now had been preparation, education, a careful process of teaching her opponent that brute force would not be enough. Now, they would discover what lay beneath the monster's fury. And Amy Rodriguez, combat medic and protector of life, would find out if her faith in the power of understanding could triumph over the galaxy's most feared predator. The arena held its breath as 2 very different kinds of intelligence prepared for the final phase of their dance. The change in Vextal was immediate and terrifying. The creature's wild thrashing stopped completely, replaced by a cold, calculating stillness that sent shivers through the watching crowd. For the first time in the battle, the monster was thinking. Instead of simply reacting, its red eyes studied Amy Rodriguez with the same intensity she had been using to study it. Amy felt the shift in the arena's atmosphere. The creature standing before her was no longer the rage-driven beast that had begun the fight. This was something far more dangerous, a predator that had learned to use its intelligence along with its physical advantages. She adjusted her stance slightly, her hands moving to a ready position she had learned during her years in the military. "It's adapting," whispered Dr. Lisa Carter from the observation area. Her tablet showed readings from the arena's sensors, displaying the creature's heart rate, body temperature, and neural activity. "Its brain patterns are completely different from before. It's actually thinking now." Captain Jake Morrison nodded. Grimly, Amy knew this would happen eventually. She's been waiting for it. Vexthal began to circle Amy slowly, its massive form moving with a grace that hadn't been there before. The creature's claws no longer scraped against the arena floor. Its breathing had steadied despite the wounds it had sustained. Most importantly, its eyes never left Amy's face, studying her movements, learning her patterns, preparing for something new. Amy turned to keep the creature in sight, her own movements economical and precise. She had been in situations like this before, facing opponents who suddenly became more dangerous when they stopped panicking and started thinking, drunk drivers who sobered up enough to become truly deadly, injured climbers who realized their situation was hopeless and decided to take others down with them. The key was to stay calm and adapt faster than they could. The creature's first calculated attack came without warning. Instead of the wild charges it had used before, Vexthal moved with surgical precision. Its left arm swept low while its right aimed high, trying to catch Amy in a trap she couldn't dodge. The maneuver was perfectly executed, showing intelligence and planning. Amy's response was equally calculated. She dropped to one knee and rolled forward, passing between the creature's legs in a move that would have been impossible if Vexthal had been thinking clearly from the beginning. As she passed beneath the monster, her hand found a pressure point on its inner thigh, sending a jolt of pain through its nervous system, but Vexthal had expected this. The creature's tail whipped around in a wide arc, aimed at the exact spot where Amy would emerge from her roll. The human woman saw it coming and twisted in mid-motion, taking the blow on her shoulder instead of her head. The impact sent her tumbling across the arena floor, her first real injury of the battle. The crowd gasped as Amy rolled to her feet, her left arm hanging slightly loose from the shoulder strike. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead where she had scraped against the arena's metal floor. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, human, mortal. Vexthal's roar was different now, not the frustrated bellow of before, but a sound of satisfaction. The creature had drawn first blood, and it knew that the tide of battle was turning in its favor. Amy flexed her injured shoulder, testing the damage. The joint was strained but not broken, the muscles bruised but still functional. She had suffered worse injuries during mountain rescues and kept working. This was just another problem to solve, another challenge to overcome. "She's hurt," Lieutenant Danny Price said, his voice tight with concern. "Maybe we should call for medical intervention?" "No," Morrison replied firmly. "She knew this would happen. She's been preparing for it." The captain was right. Amy had studied recordings of every battle Vexthal had ever fought, and she had noticed something that others had missed. The creature always became more dangerous when it stopped relying on pure aggression and started using its intelligence. But there was a weakness in that intelligence, a pattern that could be exploited. Vexthal attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any previous opponent. The creature's claws moved in a precise sequence, each strike designed to drive Amy toward a specific position where the final blow would be. Unavoidable. Amy saw the pattern forming and made a decision that surprised everyone watching. Instead of trying to dodge the attacks, she moved directly toward Vexthal, accepting minor cuts from its claws in exchange for getting inside the creature's reach. The monster's intelligence had made it more dangerous, but it had also made it predictable. The human woman's hands moved with practiced precision, striking nerve clusters she had identified during the earlier part of the battle. But now her attacks were different, not the gentle touches she had used before, but sharp, focused strikes designed to cause maximum disruption to the creature's nervous system. Vexthal's left arm went completely numb, hanging uselessly at its side. The creature's left leg buckled, forcing it to rely on its right side for balance. Amy had turned the monster's own intelligence against it, using its predictable attack patterns to position herself for these precise strikes, but the creature was still learning. As Amy moved to disengage, Vexthal's right arm swept around in a backhand that caught her across the ribs. The blow lifted her off her feet and sent her sliding across the arena floor, leaving a trail of blood on the metal surface. Amy struggled to her feet, her breathing shallow from the damaged ribs. The injury was serious. At least 2 ribs were cracked, possibly broken. Every breath sent pain shooting through her chest, and she could taste blood in her mouth. But she remained standing, her eyes still focused on her opponent. The crowd was on its feet now, thousands of beings from across the galaxy watching in stunned silence as the battle reached its climax. Ambassador Zektar's scales had turned pale with shock. No opponent had ever lasted this long against Vexthal, and certainly none had ever managed to inflict such systematic damage on the creature. Vexthal was breathing heavily now, its massive form showing the effects of the prolonged battle. The creature's left side was still partially paralyzed, and dozens of small wounds leaked blood onto the arena floor. But its eyes still burned with intelligence and determination, and it knew that its human opponent was finally weakening. Amy wiped blood from her mouth and reached into her field pack for the first time in the battle. The crowd tensed, wondering what weapon she would finally reveal. But when her hand emerged, it held only a small medical injector, the kind used for emergency pain relief. She pressed the device against her thigh and triggered it, sending a dose of combat stimulants into her system. The medication would mask the pain from her injuries and give her a temporary boost in strength and reflexes. It was standard equipment for combat medics, designed to help them function when wounded soldiers needed their help. Smart, Morrison murmured. She's buying herself time to finish this. Amy looked up at Vexthal, her vision clearing as the medication took effect. The creature was watching her with something that might have been respect, recognizing in her the same determination that had made it a champion. They were both wounded now, both fighting through pain, both refusing to give up. The final phase of their battle was about to begin, and only one of them would walk away. But Amy Rodriguez had not come this far to fail now. She had faced down. Avalanches and forest fires had pulled people from burning buildings and collapsed caves, had spent her entire life fighting against impossible odds to save lives. Today she was fighting to save an entire species. And she would not lose. The arena held its breath as the two wounded fighters prepared for their final confrontation, each one knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of billions of lives across the galaxy. The final confrontation began with both fighters circling each other slowly, their movements careful and measured. Amy Rodriguez's breathing was shallow from her broken ribs, but the combat stimulants had cleared her mind and steadied her hands. Vexthal's left side remained partially paralyzed, forcing the creature to compensate with its right arm and leg, but its red eyes still burned with determination. The arena had fallen completely silent. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy watched without making a sound, understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This was no longer just a battle between two fighters. It had become a test of everything that made their species who they were. Amy knew she had only minutes before the pain. Medication wore off and her injuries became overwhelming. She also knew that Vexthal was reaching its own limits, despite the creature's incredible endurance. The paralysis in its left side was spreading, and the dozens of small wounds she had inflicted were beginning to take their toll, but the creature was still incredibly dangerous. Its intelligence had made it more unpredictable than ever, and its desperation was making it willing to take risks it would never have considered earlier in the battle. Vexthal's final attack came with everything the creature had left. It launched itself across the arena in a move that was part charge, part leap, and part controlled fall. The monster's massive form blotted out the lights above as it descended toward Amy with its remaining claws extended. It was a move that would either end the battle immediately or leave the creature completely vulnerable. Amy had been waiting for exactly this moment. She had studied every recording of Vexthal's previous battles, and she had noticed that the creature always finished its opponents with the same devastating aerial assault. Every previous challenger had tried to dodge or deflect the attack, and all had failed, but Amy Rodriguez was not going to dodge. Vexthal descended toward her. Amy stepped forward and dropped to one knee, her hands moving with the precision of someone who had performed emergency surgery under impossible conditions. She caught the creature's momentum and used it against itself, redirecting the massive body's trajectory. With a technique that combined her medical knowledge with her years of mountain rescue experience, the result was devastating. Vexthal's own weight and speed drove the creature into the arena floor with crushing force. The impact shook the entire stadium, cracking the reinforced metal surface and sending shockwaves through the viewing stands. Dust and debris filled the air as the arena's emergency systems activated, checking for structural damage. When the dust settled, Vexthal lay motionless on the arena floor. Its massive form sprawled across a crater of twisted metal. The creature's breathing was shallow but steady, indicating that it was unconscious but not dead. Amy knelt beside the fallen champion, her hands already moving to check for serious injuries. The crowd erupted in chaos. Thousands of beings were on their feet, shouting in languages that no translation device could keep up with. Some were cheering, others were protesting. and many were simply stunned by what they had witnessed. Ambassador Zektar stood frozen in the hegemony's viewing box, his scales cycling through colors that had no names. The reptilian diplomat had expected to witness another demonstration of his empire's power. Instead, he had watched their undefeated champion fall to a human grandmother who treated her defeated opponent with the same care she would show any patient. Amy's hands moved over Vexthal's body with professional competence, checking pulse, breathing, and pupil response. The creature had suffered a concussion and several bruised ribs, but nothing that would cause permanent damage. She opened her field pack and began treating the most serious wounds. Her movements automatic after decades of medical training. "She's helping it," whispered Dr. Lisa Carter from the human observation area. "She could have killed it, but she's treating its injuries instead." Captain Jake Morrison smiled for the first time since the battle began. "That's what humans do, Lisa. We don't fight to destroy our enemies. We fight to protect what we love." The arena's medical team arrived within minutes, but they stopped short when they saw Amy already working on their patient. The human woman was using techniques they had never seen before, combining different medical traditions into an approach that was both gentle and highly effective. "Your methods are unfamiliar," said the lead medical technician, a blue-skinned Valdari with 6 arms. "But they appear to be working better than our standard treatments." Amy looked up from her work, her face still streaked with blood and sweat. "Every species heals differently, but pain is universal. If you understand how to help someone feel better, the specific techniques don't matter as much as the intention behind them." Vexthal's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on the human woman kneeling beside it. The creature's voice was weak but clear when it spoke. "You could have killed me, why didn't you?" Amy's smile was the same one she had used to comfort frightened children in emergency rooms. "Because defeating you wasn't the point. Understanding each other was." The massive creature struggled to sit up, its movements careful and deliberate. "I have fought warriors from every species in the galaxy. None of them showed mercy. None of them offered help after victory." "Then maybe you were fighting the wrong people," Amy replied gently. "Or maybe they were fighting for the wrong reasons." The conversation was being broadcast throughout the arena, and the crowd was listening in stunned silence. Representatives from dozens of worlds were reconsidering everything they thought they knew about strength, about victory, about what it meant to be civilized. Ambassador Zektar approached slowly, his aggressive posture replaced by something that looked like confusion. "We came here expecting to face Earth's greatest predator. Instead, we encountered something we didn't know existed." "What's that?" asked Captain Morrison, who had joined the group on the arena floor. "A species that has learned to be stronger than their own nature," the ambassador replied. "We assumed that beings from a death world would be savage, brutal, focused only on survival. But you have shown us something different." Amy helped Vexthal to its feet, supporting the creature's weight with surprising strength. "We learned a long time ago that the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest claws or the strongest armor. It's the one who can choose mercy over violence and still win." The implications of her words spread through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Species that had spent centuries focused on military might begin to question whether they had been measuring strength correctly. The idea that true power might come from restraint rather than aggression was revolutionary. In the days that followed, the hegemony empire withdrew their demands for Earth's subjugation. More importantly, they requested cultural exchange programs, wanting to understand how a species could be both peaceful and formidable. Other civilizations followed suit, eager to learn from the humans who had redefined what it meant to be strong. Amy Rodriguez returned to her quiet life on Earth, but the galaxy remembered her lesson. The most dangerous predator was not the one who could kill most efficiently, but the one who could choose not to kill and still emerge victorious. And in the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, a new designation was added to humanity's file. Deathworlder's classification, Protector, the most dangerous kind of predator there was. Because they had learned to be something more than predators. The stars themselves seemed brighter, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy there was a species that understood the difference between being strong and being right. And sometimes, just sometimes, being right was enough to change everything.